Welcome to the webinar, Maldives Tourism in the Age of Escapism. I'm David Johnson, and I'm the CEO of Delivering Asia Communications, and I'm your moderator today. Just a few housekeeping points before we get going, for which is going to be a really exciting session, in that on your screens, there's the Q&A function below. Please ask questions there, and the questions that we can't get to, we'll make sure we collect them and respond to them afterwards. The other point is that the session is going to be recorded, and so the recording and the presentations will be sent to you as a link immediately after the session. So, so you'll be getting that. So let's get going. And what a time for the Maldives at the moment. It seems that everyone is racing to the start line at the moment, certainly in the Asian region. And the announcement from the Ministry of Tourism that the Maldives is looking at opening up to international visitors in July. So that's big news, and it's something that we're going to certainly be discussing today. But before we get to that, and that's certainly going to be referenced in this conversation, please let me introduce you to Jesper Palmquist. Jesper Palmquist, Area Director, Asia Pacific of STR, the man with the data. Jesper, please.
Fantastic. Check, can you hear me okay? And you can see this slide, the first slide on my screen?
Very good.
Yes, Jesper.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm all prepared. I got my Maldives mug, and thank you and good afternoon from Singapore. And it's time to buckle up. I've got to run through a fair amount of data here in the next 8 minutes. Now, the backdrop of this, if we just start on performance, last few years has seen, you've seen these graphs, that part of that reason why there was a slump is pressure on performance with new supply and the headwind generally. But if you look, like at the end, it looks a little bit better. But if we go to the next slide, you see there's something there around the third quarter, comparing 19 and 18. Q3 usually holds it back. And historically, anything from May onwards to the end of the year really doesn't have a great trend line in the past 5 years. So January through April has been killing it in performance, and elsewhere, not great in the 5 years. So that's an interesting story, which is contrary to many other markets. But 2019 being flat was counter-cyclical to the rest of the Asia Pacific market. It was a bit of a comeback and not too bad, but particularly with that ADR growing at 2.3%, which is pretty good. And we'll get back to the ADR point later. The general trend was that it was heading in the right direction, and we were forecasting 2020 to be a good year. I don't have to do a nice graph on 2020 because it's pretty obvious. It was normal in 20, people were clearing out, and then nothing happened. So nice and easy for me. But back to the supply point, because there's still a pipeline of new supply coming into the Maldives. And before the end of last year, we're looking, right, there's a milestone coming. We're reaching for the 20,000 resort rooms in the Maldives. Are we heading there? Now, on the books right now, we got about 3,500 plus rooms. That's a 20% increase. So we still have a lot of those rooms that were planned earlier to come into the market. When are they coming? Well, as for the books now, 25% in this year and 60% next year. Delays? Sure. We expect delays here just as much as any other markets because of what's been happening now. But generally, I think it'll pick up pace because a lot of that is already in construction as well. What's coming? More upper upscale. Makes sense. 2/3. That's what developers want. That was the customer want, so nothing strange there. For each market that we look at, we see through coming out of the crisis or midway through, wherever we are, what factors are specific and interesting to Maldives. And I picked these today. And I find Maldives have something in terms of that inherent benefit. The resorts have social distancing built in from the start. The villas, the space, the ocean. There's a lot of other markets that need to reconfigure and trying to find that out. It's also the third highest RevPAR country in 2019 after Turks and Caicos and French Polynesia. It's ADR driven, and remember, this is going to be an occupancy race to the rest of 2020, trying to get some people. You need, in the Maldives, a little bit fewer because just feeds that ADR, and that's a good thing. And repeat customers, which we know Maldives have, means you may not have to entirely chase new customers. On the flip side, of course, we know it's wholly reliant on the international markets. So much of GDP is tourism. And please remember, it's extremely hard to reboot a nation. This is way beyond what tourism means. And Maldives has to prove that it can handle a potential spike, have everything in place, and that markets have confidence in that. So what's next? And that's the interesting thing. Now, let me give you a European example, and I get to why. because this is showing data on the books for 5 big markets in Europe. This is booking, what's happening on the booking pace up until December this year. And we have now in the last week started seeing in Germany, Austria, Netherlands, a little bit of signs. People are starting to book hotels because they're opening up, but it's not much. And if they're not booking for this summer peak, if they're not booking close trips in December, they're not booking the Maldives either. So not yet. The confidence is not there yet, just, you know, in terms of timing. And we're bringing this forward looking to Maldives soon. But the July topic earlier, I mean, that's the thing. That's an unknown factor, right? When is it opening up? So never mind that in a way, because what you need to do is figure out the revival plan. What, you know, when are you going to open to who and to whom? But what is going to be the change when you do it? Do you need to change anything for health and safety, the rooms and the whole buffet conversation? But also, if your tour operators can't supply with the business, how are you working with OTAs and direct channels? What's your marketing strategy? Finding those sources. And for me, the sources is the interesting bit. The arrivals map is so clear and easy for the Maldives, right? It's very simple. You know which countries supply the most tourists to Maldives. You know which grow the fastest. You just need to add the safety bucket to it, right? And when you look at Europe and India, you can't bundle it, of course. You got to look at it. Is it Italy more? UK and Russia maybe less, the way the virus is not being dealt with there in a way, right? Compared to Germany and Italy and other markets. And also the point in India is it's not just for at a federal level, it's at the state level. Decisions on how they open up is at the state level. So maybe Kerala is more interesting than Maharashtra, right? And that's obviously an increasing source market for the Maldives in the last couple of years. And the Chinese as well. So wherever you're looking at, it's trying to figure out exactly, better pinpoint your target source markets and adjusting your goals, because we're not looking at 2 million arrivals anymore. Is it back to 2012 at 1.2 million? Is it 1.4? Adjust your the expectation of what everyone is thinking is going to happen. That's what you got to do. Now, when we forecast for Maldives, when we look at that, we have noticed much longer cycles. This chart just shows 20 years, what's been going on. And if you look at it, the down cycles have been longer. And that obviously you look at SARS, you look at GFC, and you look in the latest with the new supply and what we are in now. There are long downward cycles. And the negative part of that is, of course, profitability overall, and the economic is hit so badly as it is now, we absolutely expect it to take a long time to get back to track. So there is some harsh reality factors in there. So my ending point, when I ask my own questions and answer them myself, now, when are we back and what recovers first? Well, the Maldives is like Singapore. We don't need to mention domestic leisure, etc. It's all about that revival plan I just talked about, drawing that map out and be ready once you're allowed to do it. The ones that do a better job will gain an advantage without a doubt. When are we back in 2019? Well, again, the economy hit is big and takes time. We expect 2019 levels at 2024. That's a long time. 2022 will be pretty close, but the economic disaster that this prevents just means even if you had a big domestic market, those markets will be faster. It's going to take a long time. Now, reality sucks for profitability as well. It's going to take longer. Just like there's a different pace in cost increases after an economic crisis. So that will take a little bit longer, right? So what will change? That's a lot of negative sentiment there, but it's the reality of what we're in. What will change? Well, you'll get a hole in the state coffers hitting taxpayers. You get some pipeline delays, maybe some asset shift as well because of debt restructuring. Health and safety measures will maybe be in place, but people will accept that over time and get used to it. But maybe not tracking apps and things, I don't know. People will do more online meetings, sure, and there'll be hybrid meeting events. But potentially and hopefully also a more targeted approach, a plan in place centrally and by operators. You'll have metrics, which countries and structure and how you get on. So that's where the government association or properties need to get together. What won't change? Well, you still need a benchmarking scorecard for those conversations because not knowing where you are is the worst excuse. So tourists will return, old and new, because Maldives is too good for that not to happen. That is my final, slightly more positive view. Thank you.
Jesper, thank you. Excellent insights as always. I'm now going to go over to a gentleman who needs little introduction, the founder of Six Senses, who then moved to Soneva. Sonu, I would like to bring you in, please. And the key question, the first question that I have for you is, how do you think now that the Ministry of Tourism is looking at opening up the destination to international arrivals in July. How is this going to play out? How do you see this happening?
Yeah. I mean, you touched on a very good point. Well, firstly, thank you for that presentation. It's a bit depressing, so I'm I'm trying to hold back the tears. You know, having a lot of assets in the Maldives, 2024 to get back to 2022. Yeah, I mean, I have views on that. My experience has been obviously the past, where those dips have been shorter. I understand that the Maldives RevPAR has been trailing the last few years, but I think that's because of, it's a lot of similarity. I think we found actually in our personal experience, RevPARs have actually been extremely robust, and it's about creating unique individual products. But let me get back to your question, David, and thank you so much for allowing me to join this event. So I think you touched on a very good point. One step in this road to recovery is opening the borders. And it's a combination of desire, as we heard earlier, and ability. What we've actually seen is, so a little bit of ability is now been achieved with the borders opening. To answer the question on desire, we've actually seen quite a lot of desire. There was mention earlier about the isolation, the natural isolation of the Maldives. This idea of one island, one resort is something that resounds very well generally with the public, and we're seeing that. A lot of people who might have gone to Europe in the summer, Russians, Indians, etc., are booking, and they're seeing how they can get in here. So funny enough, touch a bit of wood, I'm always a bit of an optimist. This June might be the best June we've ever had. It's not a great month, so it's not a huge deal, but in terms of revenues, not profitability, because of course costs have dropped, but in revenues. And I think we're seeing July, August to be interesting as well. So in the short term, there's definitely a gravitation towards one island, one resort. But then there are two more aspects about ability. You know, the desire, in my opinion, is there. We're seeing inquiries that are stronger than they've been during the COVID phase. They're almost at pre-COVID levels. Some weekends are actually stronger. As touched upon earlier, it's more direct rather than through agents and tour operators because of what's happened with the travel trade. But coming back to ability, the two aspects of ability. One is, you know, you have the desire, but then can you get on a plane? Is the plane flying? And it's a little bit chicken egg. And then the other is the principal markets, those 6 key markets to the country that were touched upon earlier. Is the government going to engage in bilateral agreements to create travel bridges, or as whatever the other phrase is? So that's going to be very important, and that's uncertain. You know, as we speak, Britain now has a 14-day quarantine on returning into the country. It's the same with China. So when will that change? There was some good news that I read that Britain's considering travel bridges at the beginning of July. I would hope that the Maldives, being a member of the Commonwealth, and Boris having turned his back on Europe, at least wanting to, hopefully will embrace the Commonwealth, and as you know, as one of the poorer and smaller members of the Commonwealth, who's handled the virus very well. So the performance of the government's been brilliant. It wasn't like in some countries, you know, 30 days or 35 days before lockdown. It was 6 hours between the first case in Mali and the lockdown there, and it's naturally isolated. So most governments would say, well, the spread is well under control in the Maldives. They've got COVID under control. The fatality rate is one of the lowest in the world. You've got Singapore at 0.06%, Qatar at 0.05%, and the Maldives at 0.3%. So quite dramatically low. But it requires effort. It requires government-to-government effort. The safe tourism guidelines have not come out yet. Our recommendation to the government is that they consult the 6 major countries and get their views on whether they're happy with the safe tourism guidelines, because it's great to have safe tourism guidelines. It's great to reopen your borders. But if your principal markets like China, #1, India, #2, you know, UK, Germany, Russia, and Italy, if those principal markets aren't going to let their citizens travel to the Maldives without onerous conditions, that'll be a problem. So, and it's chicken and egg, because until airlines see that there's a good relationship government to government, they're not going to start the flight. So,
Right.
yeah.
In terms of post-COVID luxury, how are you feeling it regarding that? Changing behavior post-COVID, is sustainability the new luxury, health and wellness the new luxury? We'd just be interested in your views on how you see that.
Yeah. Yes. Sure. Clearly, being in isolation for 2 months, sustainability has gone up on the agenda. People have seen the benefits. This morning I was snorkeling. I'm here at Fushi, and I've never seen such a big reef shark in our lagoon. It was like nearly 2 meters, swimming almost head to head. And in the past, they were very small. So the lack of activity has improved that. And I think in other countries, people have just seen, we take blue skies for granted, and the lack of smog, but people have benefited from that. So it's clearly something that people are talking about. There's clearly greater concern about health and wellness, that's for sure. But they're sort of qualifiers, in my opinion. I think the differentiators which the Maldives has is, because at the end of the day, people, especially at the luxury end, unfortunately, people have good aspirations, but the wealthy people say, well, I worked really hard this year. I didn't see my children so often because I was on business meetings and trips. And, I deserved the money I earned. I earned a lot. I'm very wealthy, but it's been a tough year and I deserve that holiday. So what's in it for me? And it'll just boil back to the experience again, the beauty of the experience, how safe they feel now in a post-COVID environment. And from that point of view, the Maldives is great because of this one island, one resort concept. The initial draft of the Safe Tourism Guidelines had 2 criteria. One is a COVID-19 test a week before arrival. The other was one on arrival. They've taken that out of the second draft, the COVID test on arrival, but we will do it. So we personally, at Soneva, we've given a donation to the government, the availability of a testing machine on Marfaru Airport, and all our hosts, we bought test kits for that machine ourselves. We'll be operating it with the help of the ADK clinic, and all our employees will be tested on arrival 2 more times. Our guests will be tested on arrival and 1 more time. And why? Because it just increases the safety. They say there's an 80% success rate with 1 test. Obviously, with 3 tests, it's higher, and there's an incubation period of 14 days. So that's really what the luxury will be. It will be giving people a private island where they can start to engage with their friends. Of course, we'll follow the guidelines, tables being far apart, and so on. Our hosts will not wear masks in public areas. There'll be very thorough hygiene standards. But we also need to bear in mind the facts. And I think there is this element of, as FDR said when in his inauguration speech, the greatest fear is fear itself. And I believe that the world has been overtaken by that. Because when we do study and analyze the facts, and I can see this has been a very fact-based webinar so far, we've been speaking to various infectious disease experts over the last 3 weeks to understand three leaders in the UK, US, and 2 in the US, 1 in Singapore. And what they said was the fatality rate, if you're under 50, the fatality rate is the same as that severe influenza we had in 2018, no greater. It's only if you're over 50 and slightly infirm. The other point we saw from the United Center for Biodefense, they explained that the half-life of a virus in normal conditions, like in an air-conditioned environment, like you have in Singapore, that's why it's spread in Singapore, is 18 hours on a surface, where it's 25% humidity and 75 degrees. But when you get to 95% Fahrenheit and 80% humidity, the half-life goes to 1 hour. So from 18 hours down to 1 hour. If you have a bit of exposure of UV, like the sun's coming in or you're in an open space, it's down to 2 minutes. When they contact traced 7,000 people who had been in contact with COVID positive people in the open air, not the inside, but in the open air, only 1 in 7,000 people were infected in the open air. So in the open air, in our environment, chance of infection anyway is low, and then we're going to create these COVID test traps. And so in a way, that will be a little bit of a luxury where they're in a bubble of hopefully health and protection and then of course the sun and the food that generally we offer. And yeah.
That sounds fantastic. If there are any lessons that we've learned in lockdown and because of COVID for the destination and for humanity in many ways, what would they be in your opinion?
Right. So I think we've changed our habits. You know, one of the big issues I find is that we have solutions today. So we could solve the global warming challenge today. Solar, for example, in most parts of the world, even colder climates, is cheaper than the fossil fuel. So why are we building that capacity? Because we can't change our way. We're just so used to doing things the same way. And what COVID has done is it's broken that normality. So we hopefully have realized that we can change our ways. We've changed our ways in the way we work. And I suspect that travel will drop, at least corporate travel will drop. I suspect that people will be a bit more sensitive to the environment. People will avoid getting in a car or a train or taking a small flight and try and get the meeting done, virtually. I think we've definitely embraced that. I mean, certainly in our organization, we're using Zoom more, and we're being able to communicate sometimes better. Sometimes a virtual meeting's better than a physical meeting, because if you've got more than 7-8 people around the table, it's easier when you're sharing a screen. But so I think those are some of the things, yeah.
So has it enhanced your philosophy at Soneva in any way?
Yes, I mean, we've our core purpose, we've been quite clear on our core purpose. And, what was quite clear in this crisis is, I mean, we knew that it would end. We've gone through many crises, in that last 30 years, and every crisis we've realized it's ended. I've always, I had cancer 2 years ago. That was a bit of a personal crisis. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. That was a crisis, but it turned into an interesting opportunity because I learned a lot about wellness, about my body, my health. And I always realized that with crises, if one looks at, what are the opportunities to learn, one benefits from it. So we really felt that, whilst we would be financially poorer from this crisis, we would certainly maintain our values. We would not compromise our values, and we would leave this crisis, hopefully, personally, as individuals in our organization, and as an organization, personally enriched and upholding our values more than ever.
Thank you. Sonu, I would like to say thank you very much indeed for sharing your views on behalf of everyone. There'll be some questions. I know you've got to drop off. There'll be some questions for you. I'll share those questions with you, and we'll get them answered for the individuals after the session. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to move to David Keane, please. Asia's leading brand strategist and CEO of Quo. David is here to interview Abdullah Jihaz, who is the chair of the PATA Maldives chapter and former president of the Maldives Association of Travel Agents and Tour Operators. David, please.
Thanks, David, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Sonu. And it's on behalf of all of us, it's really wonderful to see you looking so healthy and back at full steam and articulating as well as you always do. Yes, Abdullah, do we think that while perhaps for Soneva, for Vela, for Cheval Blanc, for the highest end, the Maldives may be more ready? Is Maldives ready for general tourism to return on July the 1st?
I think that is a very, very interesting and a tough question you've definitely put, because I'm trying to be as politically correct because of the SMEs that I represent. But to be honest, I think the high-end resorts are definitely in a better place rather than the mid-range or even the guest houses, which today is about 19% of our bed inventory is guest houses. So unfortunately, I would definitely say the higher end of the hotels. I mean, initially when they started talking about reopening, I think that was also a focus about how we could look at smaller aircrafts. We look at the Gulf streams would come to certain airports, and that was something that was discussed. But I think the whole restarting or the guideline is very much evolving Even yesterday they had a meeting and they're looking at it, how best we can do this. And I am definitely very, very optimistic the way that things are going at the moment. And I think they're doing their best in terms of the resources that they have. And I really liked what Jesper was saying as well. And I mean, it goes back to how tourism really started in the Maldives, when everyone wrote us off and said that, hey, 48 years ago, tourism could not come to a place like Maldives. We were so isolated, our geography was so unique. But today, I think that geography has become our biggest asset, biggest advantage. And I think going forward, we can really take that, because if you look at across various media outlets, across various social media, people are dreaming about Maldives. People are talking about Maldives. And I think that that appetite is there, and half our job is already done. The fact that people are eager, and Maldives is topping lists in terms of where people, in terms of whether it's wish lists or whether it is searched inquiries, on whether it was on Google. So I think Maldives will be ready, but there is a lot of fine-tuning, a lot of details that needs to be worked out, and authorities are doing their best to make sure that by July, we have a lot of these details sorted. And I'm sure they will come. Yeah.
Do you believe, and from what you're hearing, I mean, I know we were chatting yesterday, and you're saying, and exactly as Sonu was saying, that, you know, there's demand from the private jet operator, from private jets, and from the highest end. Do you believe the demand will be there to rationalize or to justify the opening of all of these resorts who, as we all know, and we can't hide away from, have suffered dramatically financially, particularly over the last 4 or 5 months and during the crisis? Is it the time to open as quickly, and is there going to be the demand in order to justify it? And what are you hearing?
See, yesterday also there was a very interesting discussion. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of hoteliers, and I think this is one of their biggest concerns as well. Operating a hotel of, say, even 100 rooms or even 50 rooms, just to have 2 rooms occupied, is not going to justify their cost. They would not get the economies of scale. There had been discussion about starting resorts in phases, starting different atolls in phases. But unfortunately, I think as of now, it is looking at things will get started depending on the operator, or depending on the resort themselves. Some of the resorts are talking about coming into the market even in October or November. So it's not that all the resorts are going to be open in July. It is up to each individual property to decide, okay, when do they want to come back to the market? And it is a decision that they have to look at their various metrics and decide on.
What kind of demand are you seeing?
I think, again, I've been talking to a spectrum of people, whether it is high-end or budget. And I would say in the last couple of days, apparently there's been a lot of demand coming directly and through various big OTAs. Unfortunately, these are numbers just on paper, simply because a lot of people have been in lockdown. They've not been able to go to their offices and update various cancellations and things like that. But in general, I think pickup is starting. Some of the hotels are even talking about over 50% on the book, even in September or October. But these are mainly the 4 stars and the little mid-range kind of hotels. So definitely there is pickup, but the question is, where are the flights? So I think all these different things need to be working together. And like Sonu also said, there's no point when you come to the Maldives and you have to go back home and be in quarantine somewhere for 14 days. So a lot of those.
What is TMA saying?
TMA was one of the first to react, just not only TMA, but all the domestic carriers. They grounded all their aircrafts. Everyone is talking about restarting, but they've not been able to restart. Unfortunately, a lot of people have been also laid off or put on no pay. I think will not be able to restart the way things were in the past, and they're going to look at with limited aircrafts how they can get started and take it from there. But there is also concern about how, with these restrictions and guidelines, how that's going to be feasible or practical. So a lot of different things still.
I remember when I've been working in the Maldives, as you know, for about 16 years. And we've been talking from the advent of the internet that there would be direct. And I remember at Hoeverfen in 2005 or 6 when we'd opened, and there was all of a sudden these few bookings online, and everyone was bamboozled by the amount of the numbers that were there. What we've been talking about and what everyone's been saying over the last few months, and given the reliability of the tour operators and the high street travel agent and the model for Maldives, the traditional model for Maldives, and as chairman of Matato, I know that you're incredibly familiar with this. Is the model as reliable as it used to be? Is the traditional tour operator model as reliable? And do you see that whether it be an OTA or direct, is there going to be a massive or rapid transformation? And if that's the case, how are the logistics going to work? You've got 2 minutes, and then I think we're out of time. 3 minutes.
Thank you. No pressure. Well, I think this was already a thing that was already evolving very much. Especially last year when we saw what happened to Thomas Cook, which was unfortunate. The big so-called traditional tour operators were changing. Things were coming online. But what's now interesting is this whole debate, what will happen post-COVID? A lot of people are saying the role of OTAs will decline. Some are saying business will come direct. Some are even saying that it'll go back to the traditional tour operators or the high sale. So I was telling this to someone saying that these are all wish lists of people's own prediction of what they would like to happen. What would really happen is once things start. And I like to say that I was listening to someone, I think one of your podcasts saying, I think it was Dilip who said that anything and everything would be accepted at this moment. And I think that's going to be what's going to happen. Whether it is OTA or whether it is the tour operator, people are going to be desperate for business, and that's not going to mind from which channel it's coming from, as long as business is coming.
But do you think the allotment model, which has obviously been the fundamental to tourism across the board in the Maldives, is that still safe in your opinion?
See, I actually made a few calls as well just today because during our conversation yesterday also we talked about this, and because I've seen this whole thing declining. Okay, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or even 30 plus years ago, people made the budget resorts or the 4 stars or the 3 stars were built on huge deposits that they acquired from these major tour operators. But it had already been declining. I think one of the biggest reasons was that there was a lot of bids that were coming to the market. There was a lot of excess supply that was coming in. There was that sort of scarcity was not there for resorts or suppliers to demand that kind of deposits. And I think that was already changing. The change was already in play. So I think that that's a thing of the past, and I don't think that's going to continue going forward.
Abdullah Ghias, thank you so much, and thanks for answering the questions. David, over to you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, both of you. Very insightful and very interesting. Fantastic. We're gonna go straight over to Dirk de Kuiper, who is the CEO of S Hotels and Resorts, who run Crossroads in the Maldives. Dirk, how would you assess the situation currently with the opening pending?
Hi, David. Hi, everyone. Maybe just a bit of a brief introduction. We listened to the very experienced panel here. We're kind of the young kids on the block. So we only entered the Maldives about 2 years ago when we acquired the outrigger Konota. And then last year, I think we started into a whole new venture with our Crossroads. So, which is kind of a significant investment for us. I mean, it's a bit of a whole integrated resort concept that we've been launching in the Maldives. And we had a great start. And unfortunately now with the last couple of weeks, obviously things have been changing in that respect. So we're new in the market, and as I said, we're learning still every day, and that's why it's good to listen to the panel. So even for us, we always can take in new things and what we can adapt and what we can learn. I think for the situation in the Maldives, we spoke about it already a bit in length. It's all about opening up, and what's the next question now? And obviously the key thing is, how it's going to work now with all these airlifts, how it's going to be with the bubbles. So this is kind of all a bit that hangs up in the air, kind of literally, that we really don't know what's going to happen. And particularly for the Maldives that we've heard before, we know our key geographical market, so there's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of how fast and how quick we're going to get these airlifts into the Maldives, and definitely that's going to help a lot. I think the second point probably as well, that we need to understand as well from a consumer's point of view, what our guest expectations are going to be post-COVID. I'm sure there will be some changes somewhere, somehow, and I think all hoteliers, we are preparing for it, and we assume that that's what a guest or a consumer might ask. And to be very honest, I don't think we're very sure about it. So we will have to see till the first guest comes through the door, and they will tell us clearly, this is what we expect from you, from your services, and what you're providing to us. So for us, just to come back on Crossroads, we are still assessing a bit the situation as it goes along, and then we will make a decision there how we want to progress and how we want to move forward in the next couple of weeks. So we're waiting a bit, like what we've heard from Abdullah earlier on, a bit on the announcements from the government, and we're going to get along. So at least there's positive news. It's opening up. I think globally as well, what we can see is there is global pressure towards governments, and particularly in the key feeder markets, I would say, people want to travel. And I think that's very clear, and we've heard that before. They want to get out, they want to go back to their places they've been before, and they want to have experiences. Most of them are repeated guests, and Maldives has quite a bit of a repeated business as well. And they are really kind of customers that they want to come back as soon as possible.
Thanks. We're talking about customers. We've talked a lot about the luxury end of the market, which is really what the Maldives is known for. But the concept of Crossroads and there's an emerging concept of affordable luxury. But it's not really an emerging concept, but that's a concept that you're looking at. How do you see that in the mix going forward for the Maldives?
Yeah, I think the affordable luxury, it's all about experiential traveling, and people might say it's a bit too commercialized, the word, but at the end of the day, and I think it revives and it comes up again, and that's what we can see as well. And from the feedback that we've been receiving from initial bookings that's coming back, particularly the Maldives, this is definitely what they're looking for. I think it needs to be convenient, I think accessible, if we call it kind of affordable luxury. And I think the key is people want to share. They want to share their experiences, and probably one of the best places in the world to do it is the Maldives, because not everybody has access to it. And that's definitely kind of, I would say, a high note and kind of an advantage that I can see for the Maldives towards in that space. Affordable luxury is not about once a lifetime. It's not about a honeymoon. It's not about couples, but I think affordable luxury could also be extended to families. We can see a lot, and particularly in Asian markets, that families want to travel. And if you can take your parents and your family, the whole family with you on an overseas trip, and particularly to the Maldives, it's a kind of an affordable luxury. You've been working hard for it, and you want to take your family there. So they are kind of the markets that you can really see that is evolving. It's very obvious after this weeks of lockdown that we can see indoors, people are looking for travel opportunities. And it's clearly in that space, the experiential tourism will surface again, and it's very strong. It's very strong. So it's all about that people want to spend in one trip to get as much as possible experience as they can. So that's definitely of a trend that we can see. And for us in Crossroads, that's definitely the way we strategize, the way we build Crossroads. It's very much gearing to those markets, kind of affordable luxury. We want to have all different experience in one environment and contain it into that environment. And that goes from shopping, leisure activities, water sports, it's a kind of a condensed package, but you have it kind of all in the vicinity and the surrounding close to you. So that's how we saw it, and coming into the markets with our affordable luxury.
Thanks. In terms of, there's a lot of talk of travel protocols. In fact, I'd say 70% of the questions that have been coming through on the Q&A are about health and hygiene. There's not one about social distancing. The one island, one resort concept is great. But just in terms of, because you have a large scale project, how are you managing that in terms of hygiene? Just a few comments, and that would be useful. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I think what we see is we've done like everybody else. I mean, there is no secret. Probably it's a global approach that the whole hospitality and probably the tourism industry and airlines and so on, we all know that we have to focus on. It's all about hygiene and sanitation, and there is no exception to the rule. So that's kind of a prerequisite, and that's something we will have to live with, all of us. It really depends to what extent you want to build it up. We've done everything like you should do, wearing gloves, masks, sanitizers, you name it, we've done it all. I think it's really analyzing your guest journey as well, what you want to offer. That goes from the arrival, check-in. So the teams have been working hard on that one for saying, well, you want to have to integrate it, all the new hygiene, safety measurements, just to make sure that whatever the guests are asking, that we can accommodate that one. I think what I can observe is we just have to be cautious and careful that we don't transform hotels into hospitals, I call it, kind of a hybrid between a hotel and a hospital. Some way that we have to find a fine balance between what are the prerequisites, what are the requirements towards safety and hygiene, but at the same time, what's the essence of our business? It's all about hospitality. And that's definitely probably a challenge that we will face as well. Maldives, not only Maldives, but in the industry, where is that thin line that we have to draw it, that we don't neglect either or, but that's something definitely that might change, and that will change post-COVID.
Dr. Kuiper, thank you very much indeed for your views, and please stick around for a few questions afterwards. I would like to move on to Gali Mutala, founder and managing director of Untitled Chapter and the Maldivian hotel investment expert. Gali, I know you've got a few slides. If you would like to start, please. Thank you. Gali, you need to unmute.
All right. Thanks a lot, David. I'm going to talk a bit about financing. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to discuss, I was going to discuss is already covered, so that makes my job a lot easier. So firstly, I'm going to give a little bit of a context into what's been happening in the Maldives over the past couple of years in terms of financing. Obviously, financing and cash flow is a huge issue at the moment for a lot of hotel owners in the Maldives and all around the world, but especially in the Maldives, because the financial sector is fairly small and it is, I would say, has been underserved. And a lot of capital in the recent years into the Maldives has been through foreign sources. You know, just to give a bit of context to people who are not really familiar with the Maldives, there has always been an element of international investment or lending into the Maldives ever since tourism actually began with tour operators providing advances in the 80s and so on. So the industry has actually developed with a lot of international participation. And this has developed in the recent years to institutional investors, large institutions such as private equity funds making acquisitions, a lot of refinancing activity through international banks, and that has continued until the end of 2019. But due to credit controls and regional issues, a lot of markets, especially markets such as Sri Lanka and India, people or hotel developers or owners have started finding it hard to access credit. So financing hotel projects has become relatively more difficult in the past few years, especially for greenfield projects. If you look at the current pipeline, what we see mostly is a few large integrated projects that are fairly well capitalized through investors from mainly Asia, banks who are supporting those projects through assets that are held outside the Maldives. So what's happening now really is it's a bit of a no-brainer. Everybody is facing cash flow issues, that has been it is becoming an increasing problem because the local banking sector also is struggling to keep up with the requirements in terms of maintaining resorts, especially. Overheads. A lot of hotel owners have been very courageously trying to keep up their payrolls and maintain and minimize downsizing. But what we're seeing is that if this continues over the rest of the year, I think hoteliers will be forced to change their minds about some of the policies that they're implementing, simply because there are cash flow issues. But the good news is that there have been easing up of repayment of debt on hotels. The government has also provided moratoriums on lease rent. And the question now is what will happen after these moratoriums are lifted. So this will not probably go on indefinitely. There is increasing interest. And another point in terms of good news is that there is a lot of cash available globally that is looking for a home. Over the past couple of years, there are a couple of $1 billion even around Asia in private equity funds in the form of dry powder, and family offices looking to deploy capital. So the question is, at what cost and what kind of risk will these investors be willing to take in such a market? That's what we are looking to see in the next couple of months. In terms of supply, due to these financial issues, we expect some of the supply that was upcoming to be taken off the table in the short term. There will be shortages in terms of financing. There may be existing supply may struggle to recover because there have been a couple of properties even pre-COVID that have been struggling to keep up with the market due to undercapitalization and issues with their financial structures. So that I think we will see that we will see along the development pipeline as well. So what are investors interested in? So in the Maldives, it's a very, very simple structure. Hotels are financed through mainly bank loans, and shareholders will fund equity. But I think over the next couple of months, we will start seeing more interesting alternative forms of debt, such as mezzanine debt, preferred equity, which allows investors to invest at a lower risk profile, but a bit of a higher return than senior lenders. And we're also obviously seeing a lot of investors expecting distressed situations. So we may see some hotels changing hands or some new equity going into some of the hotels in the Maldives. In terms of demand, I think everybody, even on this panel, has agreed Demand will not only be decided by the desire to travel to the Maldives, which I think is there, but the ability, as Sonu very well put it, to ability to travel to the Maldives. And if people are willing to travel to a long-haul destination and suffer, quarantine issues in their home countries. So as you can see in the top 10 source markets in Maldives, almost all countries require a 14-day quarantine or self-isolation when they go back home. So that will probably be a very key factor in determining the demand that will be for the Maldives over the next couple of months. So in conclusion, I think we are positive in terms of a market recovery. But I think we have to all be realistic, and I think it may get worse before it gets better, and mainly because of financial constraints and pressures that hoteliers have to face at the moment. So this, the silver lining here is that it may be an opportunity for investors to come in at fairly discounted valuations. It is an opportunity to help a country like the Maldives, which relies so heavily on the tourism industry for a lot of other sectors and livelihoods as well. I think we will also see NPLs. There may probably be defaults happening over the short term, which banks will have to address fairly quickly. I don't think any bank will have a desire to have NPLs on their balance sheets when all around the world hotels are defaulting and being foreclosed on. So in short, there will definitely be opportunities for investment, and the Maldives, I think, will recover, or it will recover. The question is whether it will recover over the next year or two, but as just may take a little bit of time.
Super, Gali, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to move directly over to Bill Barnett, Managing Director of C9 Hotelworks, who is going to talk about the China market, having just completed a China Maldives travel sentiment survey. Bill, please.
Thanks, David, and hi, everybody. As Gali actually was just talking about, the major markets, Maldives, 2019, 17% mainland China. So let's talk about where we think the green shoots eventually will come. Fish about the fish, where they're going to be. I think something interesting when we talk about who's going to come back, airlift is going to dictate who's going to come back, because at the end of the day, our airfare is going to be cheap or expensive. What airlifts venues are going to be available, that's going to define everything. And I think look to the skies to understand how recovery is going to come. That's the single most profound way you're going to be able to view this thing. So it's not a matter of looking at the volume market, it's a certain geographic segment, but airlift will be a defining factor. I think something from our China survey, which we did with Delivering Asia and their digital team in China, is we go back and speak to the customers, because these are qualified travelers, and try to find out sentiment about the Maldives. I think that's important. As over almost 1,100 people we spoke to, and I think that was interesting in terms of saying there is sentiment to travel overseas. And this is interesting because, again, we're talking about people in the market now, and certainly there is the desire now. The fear factor is moving a little bit day by day and becoming more positive. We always look back at 9/11, we understood, fine, people took their shoes off, but they still went to the airports, they still traveled. So that sentiment over time will dissipate. The fear factor will dissipate. And believe me, I'm married, so I want to go to the airport. I don't know about anybody else. So everybody out there is going to want to travel. And I think that's going to certainly be the case. But it's interesting when we talk to people, when do they want to travel? And again, there are a good percentage of people saying late this year, early next year. That would be the bulk of it, certainly, and then later on as well. But certainly there is demand, and there's pent-up demand. I think this is a good indication, whereby we're not saying today that the doors are going to open in July and that the hotels are going to be full again. We understand it's a pragmatic baby step procedure. But again, we understand the demand is building to late this year to early next year, and also to later, where there are people saying they want to travel overseas from mainland China. I think that's certainly important. I think when we look at travel to the Maldives, again, what is the sentiment? This one is really important because it's a safety factor. And I think something like, I go backwards and we say, this is, you know, I hate the word the new normal, but what is going to define people's baby steps when they travel internationally will be, what do they feel is safe? And I think 67% of those we surveyed said that the Maldives is a safer destination than other places in the present situation. Much has to do with that as a series of islands, the perception. Perception's everything. And so in terms of the actual physical attributes of the Maldives, it's suited for the situation. I think that's something we're going to see, is because there is a perception of safety. And again, 90% of those who said they want to travel overseas would like to travel to the Maldives, and only 22% had been there before. You know, again, so there's a lot of untapped demand. And I think something in our work in China over the past few months has been nature is becoming a bigger attribute. Somehow the value system, certainly in China as well, and I think everywhere, is people's people, when they're looking at a holiday, it's not necessarily culture, it's not necessarily sightseeing, it's not theme parks, but we go back to nature. 57% nature, water sports. You know, between these two categories, this is 75%. So that's an important category, understanding what's going to drive demand. And people who have been pent up in a high rise somewhere in a first year, say in China, they're saying they want to get out, they want to see the green spaces, they want to see the beaches, they want to see the ocean. And that's, again, a driver of demand. You know, which is interesting, because I don't think you're going to have people who are saying, I want to go to Europe. I certainly don't want to go to America now, but, you know, they're going to want to go to other places. So again, these are inter-regional travel. And I think this is another interesting statistic, is what type of hotel do you want to stay in? And again, the 5-star certainly is there, and it's a large number, but 4-star, and this goes back to the Maldives' trajectory towards more affordable luxury. And I think there is an opportunity, and these are the people speaking, and they're saying, would they stay in a 4-star hotel in the Maldives? There's a lot of people out there who want that kind of hotel. So in terms of Dirk, what they're doing at Crossroads and other type of properties, there is demand within that sector. But if there's airlift, that's going to drive numbers. In terms of accommodation, of course, as we know, typically with the Chinese market, typically you do see the overwater villa and the villas, these are high demand. You know, again, what they're looking at. I think this also goes back to the safety and hygiene factor as well, because they feel this attachment to these single units, whereby, again, this type of accommodation is built for this kind of situation. I think that's something where it's a good fit. So an interesting statistic here as well. I think certainly when, in terms of, this was kind of a little surprising, is when we talked about how would you arrange the booking. Is you think mainland Chinese are going to book through wholesalers, they're going to do bulk travel. 38% would say they would book hotel and flights separately. This is, you know, we always have to go back and say, these are people who've indicated they want to travel now. So maybe this isn't the mass market, but again, there is an indication that people would be willing to go back and book their flights, not as a package tour. I think this is a changing perception as we will. We're always saying, you know, we always get blasted and say people will come back to the Maldives, everything's going back the same it was. It's not going to be. I assure you with this, because this crisis is an accelerator of demand, which has already been there. It doesn't mean everybody's instantly going to book on the internet, but again, in terms of booking patterns, when you say, are they going to necessarily go to a wholesaler, depending on airlift and everything else, they, you know, wholesalers may not have charter flights. They might not have the ability to get there. So people's ability to, and their desire to book a hotel and a flight separately, that's going to dictate who your early travelers are. And certainly in terms of preferred booking channel, C-Trip, no surprise there. But when we look at Fliggy, we look at hotel websites, we look at the prominence of WeChat and these direct booking channels, we're seeing more people who are becoming adept at this. It doesn't mean the whole market's going to change overnight, okay? But that's also interesting. I think 75% who prefer independent travel over tour groups. And again, that goes back to a fear factor. It goes back to people say they want to take baby steps. They want a little more isolation. And also 49% of the respondents are in 20 to 29, meaning these are freer independent travelers and everything else. So I think that's interesting. Future outlook, escapism. I mean, it's interesting for me. You know, I'm like, you know, whatever the crisis, I'm old and fat. So I'm a dead man walking. I start traveling again. Who knows how that's going to be. But, you know, in terms of, if I'm going to choose a holiday, certainly I'm going to, in terms of escapism, when people go back after this crisis, they're going to say, where do I want to have my holidays? And from our research, not only in China, but also across Asia at this time, where we're looking at resort destinations, people looking at villas, people looking at this sole accommodation. I don't think for resorts people are going to be in a hurry to go back to a high-rise building. In terms of this, this is a matching product to a situation. I think that's why when we look at places like the Maldives, we think there's going to be a lot of demand in this market coming up post-crisis, okay? So I think our viewpoint, again, July, we're saying people are going to come back. It's going to take time to work out, but what's going to define the market is airlift. That's everything. Okay, David, that's me.
Thank you. Bill, thanks very much. We are going to go very quickly to Vanessa Zhu from our office in Shanghai, Delivering Age Communications, just to talk very briefly about how to reach. So you've defined almost a new post-COVID traveler from China, is more independent. Vanessa, could you just talk through a couple of quick things regarding, because we're running out of time, just looking at some of the new digital tools and this new ecosystem that's emerged? Thank you.
Yes. So to reach Chinese customers, it's I think you probably like get familiar with like WeChat and Weibo, but during during the quarantine, during the COVID, there's a lot of new habit has been developed. So I would like to introduce you about like a Fliggy. So I don't know if you guys know about Taobao. Taobao is the largest Chinese online shopping platform owned by Alibaba. So Fliggy actually is Taobao's the tourism product section. So compare with Ctrip is more like more like a shopping mall. So Ctrip, you're using the OTA and then you use the OTA and then to list your product, but you have to resort the revenue via OTA. However, with the Fliggy, it's more like a shopping mall. So you can open your own online store on Fliggy. Therefore, you decorate your own store, you promote your own product with a price, and then next we look at the Alipay. So Alipay actually also owns by the Alibaba, which is one of the major international payment system in China. So it's combined with a mobile phone. So you just and your bank card. So if you list your products on Fliggy and then the customer can easily just purchase it from the link and pay by Alipay. And also, I'm sure that in Maldives, there will be certain places that has this kind of QR code. Then you often see Chinese customer just use the phone, scan a QR code, and result the purchase. So normally with the Fliggy, once the purchase is resolved, then the money will go to your bank account straight away. And the next one I would like to introduce actually is the TikTok. Can we go for the next slide, please? Yes, so the TikTok actually is, I'm sure you probably noticed, it's called TikTok internationally, but in China we call them Douyin. So both TikTok and Douyin was partially owned also by Alibaba as well. That is the new media spreading method has been created during the COVID period. Before Douyin is already widely well known, but during the COVID period, everyone has to stay at home for 1.5 months. So besides looking at the contents from WeChat and from the WeChat and other method, people has more extra time to look at some new channel, which is Douyin. So Douyin is the apps contains a lot of small short video clips from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And then the contents is various, and right now it's become one of the major media or content spreading method right now. And then the usage actually covers the age from very young kids, 5 to 6 years old, even up to like a very old senior, like 80 or 80 years. And the majority of the people, actually, I would say over 60% of them covers the age from it's like the youth age from 20 something to 40. I think that's a 3 thing. And then also Douyin, once we do the live streaming, it creates a Fliggy link. Then people can look at the contents, like the contents, click the link, and result the purchase. And the money comes to your pocket via Alipay. So it's kind of a ecosystem. new
money
ecosystem
comes to
right
your
now.
pocket. That's going to be music to the ears of hoteliers. We're almost out of time. I'm just going to ask a couple of quick questions, if I may. There's one which has really dominated apart from health, because we've mainly covered the health aspect, and that's a question for hotels. You know, despite the fact that the government is saying we're looking at opening in July, and there's obviously concerns about airlift. What are the considerations for hotels about whether they will open or not? Will they open quickly, or will they wait? What are some of the factors that hotels should consider? Dirk, could you take that one, please?
Yeah, sure, David. I guess it is a bit of a consensus, I would say, on knowing opening up is one, and we know the date is done, it's set. I think now it's, and hopefully in the next couple of days, because these things are evolving very fast. We know that it's not only in the Maldives, but it's not only Asia. We're talking about a global destination here, Maldives. So we really have to know and understand a bit when these air bridges is going to open up, and as well these quarantine rules, how fast they're going to kick in. So I guess probably from talking from our point of view, they are kind of the key determinators that we will decide on opening up. And then the rest comes with it. The airlifts we spoke about, we heard about earlier on it. What Bill was saying is, yeah, it really depends who's going to fly in the Maldives. We know the markets, who they are. If the key source markets don't kick in, and there are 5, 6, or 7 of them, then we know it's going to be a tough call for the next couple of months, most likely. So again, I mean, it's a bit of reading a crystal ball, I would say, today, and things are changing as we speak. Tonight there might be another announcement coming out. We don't know. But for us, I think this is definitely what we are eyeing on to decide when we're opening up for the Maldives.
Doug, thank you. Abdullah, I have a question for you, please. There's been some discussion in the Q&A forum about wholesalers. We know there's been some issues with wholesalers in terms of paying bills because of the crisis. Is this hampering recovery in any way for agents, for hotels, for the industry in the Maldives? Yes,
for sure. I think this is a lot of resorts are talking about they're not unable. I think it's again not just the Maldives, but it's happening across in different destinations as well. They are not able to give people refunds and rather giving credit notes and things like that. They have huge outstanding. Some of the big tour operators are requesting for 9 months, even over 12 months extended credit. And definitely that is, I know some big hotel chains in the Maldives who have been talking very much about this challenge, and how even the government to help them out in this situation. So I think, yes, that is definitely becoming a big bottleneck for a lot of hoteliers and a lot of even local agents. Thank you. Gali, appreciate that. Gali, a quick question for you, please. In terms of investment, there's been a couple of people talking about they're in the middle of building a hotel. So when should they start? They're in the middle of building a hotel in the Maldives. In a couple of cases, actually, affordable luxury category, 4-star category. When should they be restarting?
I would say that if you're in early stage of development, I think there is still room for to go ahead. I wouldn't stop. It would probably inflate the cost of the project anyway. So I would say if your scheduled opening is within the next 24 months, I think you should be fine. Okay, we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to thank you all. Some of our panelists have had to drop off already, but Vanessa, Dirk, Bill, Abdullah, Gali, thank you very much for joining. Sonu, of course, who was with us earlier. Jesper was with us earlier. David also. Thank you all very much for joining for a great session. The recording will be sent to you after this. Everyone, thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.